In August of 2018, I released a video discussing the characters Vegeta and Goku, asking you the audience to decide which of the two you identify with more and who you might want to be if given the choice. By an incredibly wide margin, Vegeta was the character chosen. So I asked on Twitter, why don't people like Goku? And these were the most common talking points. Number 1, he's one-dimensional. Number 2, he's childish. And number 3, because of his character, he can be seen as predictable and boring. And while I don't agree at all with his character being boring or one-dimensional, check out my last video, I can 100% get on board with the notion that he's not a relatable character insofar as it pertaining to some large aspects of his persona and morals. Which is why we have the anti-hero. Enter Vegeta. Flawed, unapologetic when it comes to getting the job done, and oh so relatable. Since his debut in the late 80s, Vegeta has become a globally recognized character and is a favorite for many in the series. But how does one write an anti-hero character? And how did Akira Toriyama make a character like Vegeta that resonated with so many people? Well, let's take a look. What makes an anti-hero? A lot of the time nowadays, many scriptwriters both for TV and film create anti-hero characters that are just, for lack of a better term, one-dimensional bastards. And while a certain edge is part of it, it is on a fundamental level not what makes an anti-hero an anti-hero.
Anti-heroes are great guys who've turned bad for sympathetic reasons, right? For sympathetic reasons. Michael Corleone becomes a horrible man. Why? He's saving his dad. He's saving his family, right? Tony Soprano is a horrible guy, but we like him. Why? Because he wants to save his family.
When writing the anti-hero character, it is important to understand what makes an anti-hero and what does not make an anti-hero. For example, the anti-hero of the story is not the villain of the story, which means that Vegeta has not always been the anti-hero character. He became one. When he was first introduced during the Saiyan arc of Dragon Ball Z, his actions were seemingly irredeemable. It wasn't until after the fight with Goku did we notice another side to Vegeta. Typically in a movie, the anti-hero is such from the beginning, a central character that lacks conventional heroic attributes. While they may fight bravely, they might not be selfless, and if they are strong, they might not be merciful, usually acting heroically or doing heroic stuff because it's in their own self-interest, or they might believe it's their responsibility among other ideals they hold to be true. One of the most important facets of storytelling that made Vegeta's eventual anti-hero turn so compelling was his slow shift from the villain role to neutral and eventually to the good. And that right there is something that set Vegeta apart from many of the anti-heroes of the 80s time period. He developed. But what you might be asking at this point is, if Vegeta wasn't always the anti-hero, how did they change him into one?
So the great secret of an anti-hero is to make the villains and the people around them worse and less likable than the hero themselves. So Tony Soprano's mom is the most miserable, horrible human being ever conceived on television. But so we love Tony because his mom is just so awful, and we think, God, poor guy. No wonder he turned into a murdering psychopath.
The sympathetic character. If there's one surefire way to make your anti-hero shine, it's by writing a story where he has to overcome an even more despicable evil. Once Vegeta suffered the defeat at the hands of Goku, we are greeted by this scene. While not taking anything to heart, we got our first indication that Vegeta might not be the top dog, and at one point perhaps suffered ridicule at the hands of his superiors. That's relatable, and that creeping sense of sympathy is made even more palpable with the introduction of Frieza. As I said before, an anti-hero can be ruthless and merciless. He does not need to be selfless and merciful, but the audience does need to sympathize with him on some level, and he needs to be juxtaposed to a more severe evil. In the case of Vegeta, despite being a seemingly irredeemable character when he was first introduced, slowly the story fed us more and more information about why he is the way he is, how his allies see him, how his superiors betrayed him, and what life growing up in subjugation must have been like.
俺や貴様の生まれ倒し惑星ベジータが消えてなくなったのは巨大隕石の衝突のせいじゃなかったんだフリーザがやりやがったんだ
The key to connecting an anti-hero to the audience is sympathy. Their actions and moral standing might be questionable, but when the audience can empathize with the character, then they are also able to accept and understand why he is the way he is. On top of that, it frees up space for us to see his redemption arc, or good side, more clearly. The beginning of this for Vegeta was on Namek. His escapades, ducking and weaving around Frieza's men as he tried to get the Dragon Balls for himself, was always a joy to watch. And it was so because we knew he was the lesser of two evils and had a common enemy with our heroes, which led to this. That might be a fun moment to look back on, but it was also the very first time Vegeta's actions coincided with what the main cast of good guys wanted. And from that moment on, Vegeta had cemented himself as an anti-hero, fighting, albeit begrudgingly, alongside the rest of the Earth's fighters, even going so far as to heal Goku before the impending Frieza attack. And all of that played into another aspect of Vegeta that made his anti-hero so successful and, more importantly, compelling. He is an active character that drives the story forward.
If you have a full character that's real, that you've created, and then you put something in front of them, in a way they will begin to write the movie, because you know how they're going to react to whatever you put in front of them, because they're now these dimensional characters, as opposed to, let's have this happen, let's have this happen, let's have this happen, and we'll just make sure that they do these things that I've preordained. And I think that's what creates a feeling of artifice, or you've seen it all before, or boring, I think.
Vegeta is a compelling character because instead of waiting for the story to happen to him, which would be a reactive thing to do, Vegeta the character takes action and tries to manipulate the odds to his favor. Because of this character trait, Vegeta has caused many, many terrible things to happen, as well as the good that I've mentioned before. Regardless, because his character has an active approach to the story, we the audience find him extremely interesting to watch because he is the one that moves the plot forward, and that is immensely compelling. Opposites attract interest.
Whenever things get stale in a medium, the anti-hero has frequently been the tool a new generation of artists use to escape the traps the medium's fallen into. And it makes sense. In a really reductionist way, the anti-hero is simply a rebellion against whatever the medium has established as a norm.
The introduction of characters like Piccolo and Vegeta was a rebellion against what had become the norm. Dragon Ball was the story of Goku until he became a man, but the story of Goku as a man needed to be different. And so Akira Toriyama renamed this section of the series Onward, Dragon Ball Z, to reflect that it was coming to an end and to represent a change in the direction the series was taking. And to best reflect that change, the main character introduced during the initial arc of Z was Vegeta. This is a phenomenon that is observed in every single instance a certain genre gains a large amount of notoriety for a long period of time. Crime dramas were once all the rage, and so to subvert the trope of having the good guy protagonist to the genre, the anti-hero Walter White was created. A sympathetic, complicated character that was doing the wrong thing for all the right reasons. Superhero films now thrive in the box office, and so it became the perfect time to have a movie like Deadpool become a worldwide success. Now, I am by no means saying that Deadpool was successful just because of its subversion of our expectations. The film was also very well written and shot. However, what I am saying is that when a certain genre becomes stale, it inevitably gives rise to an anti-hero in that genre. The shonen genre was inundated with good boys like Goku, and so added an edge into the mix, as a main character giving rise to a whole new kind of shonen anti-hero. Whether or not Vegeta was the first in manga doesn't really matter. He is the one that has stood the test of time as the example. Don't believe me? How many times have you heard someone say that so-and-so is the Vegeta of that show? It might be due to their moral complexity or even their choices mirroring our own. But anti-heroes, for one reason or another, are intensely interesting. We earnestly root for their redemption and salivate at the thought of them paying for their mistakes. Vegeta is an anti-hero that has stood the test of time. When faced with moral paragons like Gohan and Krillin, or morally grey characters like Son Goku, we the audience understand and sympathize with the choices and actions of a great anti-hero like Vegeta. Speaking on the rise of the anti-hero, H. Eric Bender wrote, "Anti-heroes liberate us. They reject social constraints and expectations imposed upon us. Anti-heroes give our grievances a voice. They make us feel like something right is being done, even if it's legally wrong. Anti-heroes do things we're afraid to do. They are who they are, and they do as they want, without apology." And I gotta say, for 30 minutes every week watching Dragon Ball Z, we lived vicariously through him, without apology. Thank you so much for watching.